Welcome in. Happy Wednesday. Sniblets this morning. Hey, I was just talking to some different parents. We're saying their biggest fear now in the midst of this corona is that the schools are going to send their kids home and close the doors again. I think that's the parents' biggest fear. COVID-induced parental tweet. Because I'm reminded that even if you're a parent and you've sent some of your kids off to school, if you've got preschoolers, a lot of them are still home with you. And so here's the latest parental tweet. This is a parent of a 4-year-old. And I quote, the parent says, "Hell hath no fury like a 4-year-old whose sandwich has been cut into squares when he wanted triangles." I've been there. I know what you're talking about. It can throw the whole day off, can it? Well, this Sunday, we're sending out a message to you. This Sunday, we're starting a series out of the book of Hebrews. But for our Sniblet snapshot, I still kind of want to zero in on a few things that we've observed in the book of Ruth. And this comes out of Ruth chapter 1, verses 16 through 18. You know the story. Let me read it and I'll kind of give you some background. But in chapter 1, verses 16 through 18, it said, "But Ruth said, 'Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge.'" Obviously, Ruth is talking to Naomi. Said, "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God." What a statement. What a beautiful statement. Ruth wants to follow Naomi back home to Israel, to the town of Bethlehem. Verse 16, "But Ruth said, 'Do not urge me to leave.'" And then verse 17, "Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything, but death parts you and me." Verse 18, "When you saw that she was determined to go," when she, meaning Naomi, saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So Naomi let her come. You know, what you've got here in this story is Naomi has lost her husband. She's lost 2 of her sons. She's heading back home. She would just as soon her daughters-in-laws not come with her. So Naomi is kind of covering up her sin. Then Orpah, one of her daughter-in-laws, decides to give up. She decides at Naomi's urging, she goes back home, returns to her pagan gods, returns to her family there. But Ruth, she stands up. She stands out. Based upon her conviction, she wants to follow God. And Ruth trusts God in the midst of incredible obstacles. Think about the obstacles she went through. She's from Moab, first of all. They worship the god, when I say God, little G-O-D, the little god Chemosh, which in Moab, they offered human sacrifices. They encouraged worshiping God through immorality. So she was cursed with that background, coming back to Israel. Father-in-law dies, her husband dies, and then her brother-in-law dies. And then on top of that, 3 times her mother-in-law tells her to leave her and stay in Moab under the umbrella of her pagan gods. And yet, through those 6 discouragers, yet Ruth says, "No, I'm going with you. I am going to follow God." You know what it causes me to think as I was reading through this is in our culture, we tend to try to make following God so easy. We just grease the wheels. We make it easy. We make it at convenient times. We do it in comfortable surroundings and beautiful facilities. And yet many times you see people in the scriptures who follow God in the midst of incredible difficulties. And I think when we are given so much privilege, it causes us to take for granted the privilege of walking with God and having accessibility to biblical truth. You know, sometimes I think when somebody says, "Hey, you know what, I don't want to follow God," we ought to say, "I don't think you do." We ought to make it more difficult than we are. I think that's why in my core, I kind of push against the fact, trying to encourage people to be baptized before they're ready. We make it so that, hey, come on, it's easy, be baptized. And I think yet we ought to make it more difficult for folks to be baptized. So they do it when they want to, when they're convinced that this is the right thing to do. Because when we make it too easy for people to be baptized, because it's a public proclamation of their faith in Jesus Christ, well, what happens then is we do them a disservice. And I think folks get a false sense of intimacy with God. Oh, yeah, I've been baptized. And yet, and what we see in third world countries is when someone is baptized, it costs them everything. There's something about counting the cost when we follow Jesus that you can't duplicate. Ruth is extraordinary. When you consider her faith in God sees beyond bitter circumstances. Let me ask you a question. Does your faith see beyond your bitter circumstances? Then secondly, when you consider Ruth, her faith isn't dependent on comforts of the world. And many times I think in our culture, how much does our faith depend on comfortable circumstances? And then third, well, Ruth had this courage to venture out into uncharted territory, into a place where she didn't know. In fact, she was going to a place where she would be an outcast because she was a Moabite. And yet she knew God was with her and she knew God was before her. And I think, again, the question for us is how often do we venture out into uncharted, unknown territory because we know that God is in front of us and God is behind us and God is for us. Many times I think we look at life skewed instead of looking life through a biblical grid. So thank the Lord today for difficult circumstances. Thank the Lord that today we live in a time where it is becoming less and less popular to be known as a Christian. Because I think that makes you stand up for your faith based upon what you believe, not the comforts that it might afford you. Well, I look forward to seeing you this Sunday because that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about as we look into the book of Hebrews and let the Word get into us. Have a great week, and we'll see you this Sunday.